Hey, folks, welcome to the pre-show. Broadcasting to you from the North Woods of Minnesota in our clandestine digs at the American, up very close to Pequot Lakes. So, welcome. We're just getting all set up. I don't have microphones in the studio or anything like that tonight. So, of course, we're just going with computer built-in sound. And hopefully that will be sufficient enough for us. Let me get my radio stream working. I'm going to skip the update. Thank you very much. Proceed anyway. All right. So we should go live here very, very shortly. 3 minutes after the top of the hour. We go live on the radio station. So all of you sitting here, listening now, you're just getting the pre-show. Hey, Matt Finn, how you doing? Good evening. Good to see you, Master Finn. And we also have Dave Potter and Field Guy are lurking. They were lurking here prior to the beginning of the pre-show. Anyway, so we got about a minute and a half, and we go live over on the radio station. Hey, Matthew Sainsbury, how you doing? How's Barbados tonight? Michelle Canham-Free is here. Good to see you, Michelle. Glad to have you as ever, always. And those of you who were expecting a Robertson today, Wendy was not feeling very well. So her little problems with her throat and her voice continued on from yesterday. And she said, I'm just not going to be able to do it today. She wanted me to try. Check back with me in several hours, she said early this morning. And I said, let's just call it for the week. We'll just go into next week. And that way she won't have to try to make it work. We got about 25 seconds and we go live on the radio station. So all of you sit tight. I'm going to start the show at the top of the hour, which is 9 seconds away, going dark.
The Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
All right. Here we are, folks. Welcome to the program. Just want to make sure that we are broadcasting over on our radio station. Let me just make sure that everything is set up right. I think it's still set to pick up my microphone. However, I do not have a microphone here, so it's giving me a red signal. So here we go. Going to internal. That's my output. And then our input device is right here. Sorry to do this during the show, folks. It just flashed in front of me that we were not sending any sound out. So input device, boom, built-in microphone. There we are. Now we should be broadcasting over on subspace radio, subspace.radio. And we had a little glitch with the mic there. They were still thinking it was picking up my microphones in the studio. And so we had to make sure that we were all reset there. And I saw that flash in front of me just as we went live. So we are good now. So if you're listening over on the radio station, thank you for your patience as we got that worked through. And you should be listening now. And hopefully everybody is hearing me over on the YouTube channel, which is where you can also go. If you're listening just to the audio over at subspace.radio, You could also watch the video and join the chat room by going over to my YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. And when you're there, hit the subscribe button and hit the little bell and you'll get notifications. At the same time, you can also hit the join button and you can join the channel over on YouTube. Like many of the other people here have, you'll see a little icon by their names if they are members of the channel. My longtime listeners, I appreciate your support, and your support can range from $1 to $5 to $15 monthly. You can make your choice over on that join button. And thank you for doing that. That's the stuff that helps keep us alive over here and on the air. So greetings to everybody who is here. Appreciate your presence here every night. And of course, if I didn't say it, this is the Intrepid radio program for those of you who are new. And I'm your host, Scotty Roberts. And you will notice the digs are a little different. The sound is a little different because I am up in the north woods of Minnesota at a client's place. Andy Dabbs, you've heard me talk about him many times. And he has put me up in the local American Inn. And this particular room is nice. It's got a fireplace there, which is roasting me right now. It's got a hot tub over there. You can just barely see the corner of it over there. Rainy, and the kids might be coming up here tomorrow. Well, tomorrow's Thursday. It would probably be Friday morning. And so we'll see how that goes. That would be awfully nice if they could come up and spend the weekend up here. And so I am Siani Reese. Everybody I know is fighting a nasty cold right now. I'm even fighting a little bit of something back there in the back of my head and my throat. And of course, Wendy Robertson is out because of her throat and her cold. Kenny Ballos, KB, Morning Coffee with KB. Don't be afeard to show up there. He's been off the air 2 mornings in a row because he has completely lost his voice. And so a bunch of people in radio, we don't all sit around swapping spit or anything, but we're all sick. And so I hope you get better. I hope everybody here gets better. We hear you 5 by 5, says Chuck Thurston. I have no idea what 5 by 5 means. That is some kind of military intelligence term I'm not akin to, I'm sure. So everybody else who's here, thank you for being here. And Daniel Ondra is fighting the same thing. Cold and sore throat. I must be going around Virginia. So I hope you're all doing well and get better. Let me take a sip. I've been dry all day, and that's part of it. That's nice and icy cold. I am drinking a 0 sugar, classic sparkling ice lemonade. Not bad, if I do say so myself. 5 by 5, good volume and modulation. Oh, there you go, 5 by 5. I've never heard that term used that way before. Chuck Thurston, thank you. I have learned something new today. So hot lemon tea with honey for Siani. Yeah, I could probably do with some of that. I got the hot, though, coming from the fireplace over there. And see how close that thing is to the desk here? Look at this. Boom, there it is. And there's the flame going. You can see it behind the logos. Yeah, it's right there. Let me push that back into place. So tonight, I don't talk as much about UFOs and alien abductions and things like that as I do other things. And I wanted to kind of get into this tonight because there's some interesting material. This might be for some of you as easy as a primer on the topic. For me, I know stuff about this. I've known people who claim to be abductees, or they're also called experiencers. And so I think that there's some very interesting stuff out there on alien abduction and learning a little bit more about it. And of course, I've got a little article pulled up from Psychology Today that I wanted to make some reference to. What about alien abductions? And this is written by Eric Good, PhD. He's writing about the paranormal. And he believes that the way he states it And this tells you right away what he believes about some of the most famous alien and UFO stories we have in our culture, modern culture. He says, believing that a pile of debris from a military surveillance nuclear testing device found in the New Mexico desert in 1947 was the wreckage of an extraterrestrial aircraft, well, it's a plausible belief. You'd have to ignore a great deal of very persuasive, disconfirming evidence and believe in an extremely large and extremely secretive government conspiracy. But hey, a lot of people think along similar lines. So he's already denouncing the UFO crash in Roswell as being a bunch of military surveillance nuclear testing equipment. It was found in the New Mexico desert in 1947, and almost 80 years ago. And I would happen to disagree with him. I think if we knew that that was nuclear testing equipment, we'd already know that. That it would already be a widespread story out there. But he is true. He is correct. There is huge conspiracy theory behind all of this. And so looking up at the night sky, seeing alien ships when others see Venus, unconventional aircraft, odd stellar formations, northern lights, blinking towers, or any other visual manifestation from a potpourri of earthly phenomena, hey, that's not too strange. Some people have more imagination than others. They fill in the blanks where the rest of us stick pretty close to what their eyes tell them. But of course, that would depend on what your eyes are set on seeing. Already, this particular psychologist has talked about the UFO crash in Roswell being testing equipment, nuclear testing equipment. He's also saying that people look up at the night sky and see a UFO when it's actually Venus. Well, usually Venus doesn't go coursing across the sky in a straight line and take off in right angles. So I think that is really a poor example of trying to say people believe that Venus could be UFOs. Well, maybe some do, but not many do. Oh, look at that bright star that's sitting still. Well, it's a planet, and most of us know that and know the difference. But there are strange phenomena that take place that people confuse with certain things. You get that in ghost culture, paranormal culture. You get that in ufology and everything else. But alien abductions, as even this scientist puts it, are another kettle of fish altogether. This is not a matter of perceiving ambiguous stimuli in a certain way or believing in conspiracies. And remember, some conspiracies do happen and are true. And we're living in a nation right now that's filled with conspiracies that are coming true. But do alien abductions really happen? What do you guys think? Do extraterrestrial kidnapping humans, taking them to their spaceships, performing experiments on them, cutting them open, raping them, forcing women to bear hybrid babies? Does this stuff really happen? Those are many of the claims that are out there. Thousands of people believe that they've been abducted by aliens. Their memories of these experiences are vivid, they're painful, they're terrifyingly real. So what's up with that? Should we believe their stories because they're having these nightmarish memories coming to the surface? Chuck Thurston says he was no weather balloon. I knew a guy that showed me a piece of it. That wasn't anything we can build. Tiny piece, hard as steel, light as a feather. Niall Parkinson says, what do you want to know? I love this stuff. Dr. David Jacobs, I believe, had the best handle on alien abduction, a hybridization program, which began in the late 19th century to merge DNA. I happen to believe you are absolutely right. And I think Dave Jacobs is right too. Not to be confused with my friend Dave Jacobs, who also writes about all of this stuff and paranormal things. Matthew Sainsbury talks about how in Rendlesham Forest in the UK, Colonial Charles Halt had a fascinating encounter on December 26, 1920. He says it's a beam of light came near his foot, and he wrote a book on his experience. There was also encoded binary code that was remembered from that. There was also our friend Peter Robbins wrote the book a long time ago, Left at East Gate, on the Rendlesham experience. You should look that up. And he was on the show once, and we talked about those things. I'm not sure they travel light years to probe our anus, says Chuck Thurston. If they are so smart, they would stay away from us. Well, that's the big question that's out there. That's what experiencers say that they experience. Sorry, I just had a message come in from my young son, Flynn. Flynn, if you're listening, that's probably a good decision if you looked into it. He's looking at buying swords off of a website. And so he's looked into it a bit and hopefully found that there are places that don't sell as good a merchandise as you'd like to think you're getting. So there it is, Flynn, if you're listening. So going back to this psychologist writing about this stuff, tales of alien contact have been narrated for centuries. Francis Godwin's The Man in the Moon in 1638 wrote about it. Ralph Morris, A Narrative in Life and Astonishing Adventures of John Daniel in 1751 wrote of alien abduction. They're taken today as intended fiction. However, in 1758, in Concerning Earths in Our Solar World, Emanuel Swedenborg made the claim that he had actually visited all the known planets, which he described in great detail, all inhabited by creatures who had devised ideal societies. And now we know now of the existence of planets that weren't described by Swedenborg, Uranus or Uranus, I prefer. The only reason I can think that they've ever changed the name Uranus to Uranus is so people don't have to be embarrassed about saying Uranus. But I can't think of any other reason we've changed the pronunciation. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the last of which astronomers declassified as a planet. And we know the ones he described bear no relation to his accounts. And of course, all the evidence we have says that they're uninhabited. And how was Swedenborg to know that half the planets in the solar system were gaseous and couldn't support the weight of solid objects such as humans? Or that Venus is a toxic hothouse of sulfuric acid that could support no conceivable life whatsoever? And the truth is, he knew virtually nothing about what was on our solar system's planets, and he couldn't have. And so the pre-1947 literature on alien contact usually has the contactee visiting another planet. And these narratives include an account given in 1890 by Helen Smith of Martians speaking a language that sounds very much like French. Oh, you will come to our planet. Oh, no. S'il vous plaît. Mon Dieu. So they spoke a language which was a lot like French. And in 1906 by Sarah Weiss, who described non-existent Martian canals in great detail. In 1918 by Aleister Crowley, who describes contact with Lam, an inhabitant of a distant constellation who has bulbous head and tiny beady eyes. And in 1930 by one Willard Magoon, who described Mars as a beautiful, lush planet of forests, parks, and gardens. And today's contactees hardly ever tell stories of being transported to extraterrestrials' home planets. Instead, the aliens are here on Earth, and the contactees are frequently abducted and taken onto an alien spaceship. When listened to or read a tale of alien abductions, we're confronted with the phenomenon of close encounters of the fourth kind. Abductees, who prefer the term contactees or even experiencers now, describe all manner of contact, a great deal of it sexual in nature. This parallels with imaginary or invented satanic ritual abuse, frequently described in the 1980s and the 1990s, and the similarity is extremely strong. John Mack a Harvard psychiatrist, endorsed the idea that the stories that his patients told him were about having been abducted by aliens were literally and factually true. And of course, you have to ask, where's Mac's evidence? He was convinced because of the intense, heartfelt emotion that accompanied the stories of these contactees, and because of their narrative consistency. And they had to be telling the truth, Mac reasoned, because they had no reason to lie. They told their stories reluctantly. Their stories were similar to one another. Their therapeutic sessions with him were filled with genuine terror. They aren't faking or seeking attention, Mac reasoned, nor are they insane. They sincerely believe that they are telling the truth. And members of folk and tribal societies have told consistent and emotion-laden stories of being attacked and seduced and apprehended and abducted and threatened or terrorized by ghosts, goblins, elves, demons, fairies, old hags, and associated incubi and succubi, with great emotional intensity for thousands of years. And for Mac, the highly emotionally charged manner in which these accounts were narrated to him was the empirical observation that convinced him of the reality of aliens coming to the Earth. So scientists tend to be skeptical about contactee reports, just like this guy obviously is. And the fact that most never point to independent corroborating witnesses who can confirm their stories or have witnessed the abduction, even if they've been taken in an urban environment such as New York City, seems to be of little concern to believers. To the scientist, this consideration makes the assertion highly suspicious. Chuck said, if somebody's going to be, over in our chat room, by the way, folks, if someone's going to travel light years of distance, they first have to manage time travel, which is an impossible, just not known to us yet. And of course, these are the things that we understand with our science. So perhaps there is something undiscovered that we don't know about, I would say to Chuck. And I've read some decent articles on that topic. Perhaps there are modes of travel that sound very science fiction-y that might not have anything to do with having to defy the laws of physics as far as time travel goes. Niall Parkinson says, in order to speak of alien abduction, you have to speak of UAPs and UFOs. And in my opinion, there are different scenarios. Abduction is clandestine and by its nature, unseen. That's Niall over in our chat room. And so when you start looking into this from a psychological point of view or a skeptic's point of view, the problem is that you gauge it by what we think we know. And this is, there was one chapter in one of my books that I called Science Almighty, and how we tend to lean on science, but we don't really know everything. We only know certain parts of science, and we only know certain things. There are probably sciences and facets of science we know nothing about, which open up the floodgates. So the fact that a remarkably high proportion of abductions occur during hypnagogic, well, not abductions relating the tales of abductions, occur during hypnagogic, in a twilight state when falling asleep, and hypnopomic when waking up. These states, it forces scientists to wonder whether these are hallucinations, dreams, rather than genuine real-world events. And to the ufologist or the UFO believer, this issue is of little concern or interest. And I don't think that's true. I think that there are a lot of UFO believers, if you will, that want to know more facts about what they're hearing, what they're being told, the stories that are being related. And the fact that contactees return from their experience with aliens and space vehicles without any extraplanetary physical souvenirs, an apparatus of some kind, an article of clothing, Apparently, aliens never wear clothes. Part of a spacesuit, perhaps they can breathe our atmosphere without difficulty. A scrap of metal, glass, plastic. It could be that they've evolved beyond the need to have any of those primitive materials. Food, maybe they didn't eat or drink. Something, anything, nothing. And if they do obtain such an object, they should take it to the Smithsonian, the Museum of Natural History. Apparently, they don't got it. Why shouldn't scientists be suspicious of them? And of course, you can tell by the way this particular psychiatrist is starting to talk about all of these things. He brings up all the things that are the reasons to not believe something from the point of view of being skeptical. So his point of view is grounded firmly in a pre-bias of skepticism. So ufologists don't seem to be bothered by these matters, but they would be ecstatic, as all of us would, if a contactee backed up a story with a solid piece of identifiably transgalactic paraphernalia. Sure, they would. But maybe it's something completely different than being able to bring something back with you. There you go. Have to keep wetting my whistle tonight. Dave Potter, Uncle Dave says, not known to us in the public, but we don't know what our government has access to and hasn't told us about or has lied to us about. That's a very salient point, Uncle Dave. We don't know what we know. We don't know what we don't know. And that's one of the hard things about it. So the fact that abductees return claiming to have had experiences that normally leave physical traces when they display none, or unremarkable, clearly earthly marks caused by scientists to be extremely skeptical about whether such experiences actually took place. Female contactees report having been impregnated and bred for alien hybrid offspring. Yet gynecologists detect no such physical changes in their bodies. So contactees report having been cut open, yet no scars, or only old and conventional scars can be found. Electronic devices are reported to have been implanted in their brains. Yet again, none that are indisputably extraplanetary have been located. As an explanation, contactees claim that the technologies of the extraterrestrials is so powerful, so advanced, so sophisticated, that aliens can make evidence of such interventions disappear or blend in with the human tissue. And Mack agrees. He claims that implants have been recovered from the bodies of contactees, but when retrieved, they turn out to be unremarkable and not uncontestably of extraterrestrial origins. He argues that the genetic or chemical structure of material in his patients' bodies conform to earthly specifications. And that's of little significance, since, again, aliens are capable of altering that material. So scientists and most physicians don't buy it. And usually this matter is of little or no concern to abductees and ufologists. So such evidentiary claims and these issues don't disprove the contactees' claims, but they do explain why many scientists are skeptical about claims that attract many fervent, committed adherents. And this will remain the case until extraplanetary beings actually do pay us a visit in the open or leave something behind that's unquestionably theirs, not ours. Now, I remember hearing skeptic P.Z. Myers, teacher of evolutionary biology at the University of University of Minnesota Moorhead, and he talked at he's a huge, you could call him asshole skeptic. He works very hard to disprove this stuff exists, but he said on our own podium, he said that I would love it if we had evidence of extraterrestrial visits. He says, do you not think the entire scientific community would be dancing a jig along with me? He says, I just don't believe we have. And that's his point. And so how do you acquire a planet and its resources? You integrate yourself into it, says Niall Parkinson over in the chat room. Reminds me of the movie The Thing, said Sarah Yusuf. Stranger than Michael Schumer. Exactly. So that's the way one psychologist looks at it. And that's his take on things. And alien abduction, it's also called the abduction phenomenon or the alien abduction syndrome or UFO abduction. All of these things have names, by the way. And it refers to the phenomenon of people reporting their experience of being kidnapped by extraterrestrial beings, subjected to physical and psychological experimentation. And people claiming to have been abducted are usually called abductees or experiencers. And most scientists and mental health professionals explain these experiences by factors such as suggestibility, false memory syndrome, sleep paralysis, deception, psychopathology. Skeptic Robert Schaefer sees similarity between some of the aliens described by abductees and those depicted in science fiction films, in particular Invaders from Mars from 1953. I also think, though, you see a lot of that patterned after the whole alien mythos has grown so big, it's hard to tell where the movies began and the other stories began, so or ended. And so typical claims involve forced medical examinations that emphasize the subject's reproductive systems. Abductees sometimes claim to have been warned against environmental abuses, the dangers of nuclear weapons, or to have engaged in interspecies breeding. And the contents of the abduction narrative often seem to vary from the home culture of the alleged abductee. Unidentified flying objects, or UAPs nowadays. Alien abductions, mind control plots can also be part of the radical political apocalyptic and millenarian narratives. So that's all these narratives that talk about the end of the millennia, the beginning of the millennia, new millennia, apocalyptic talk, and so on and so forth. Cheers, one and all. And reports of the abduction phenomena have been made all around the world, but are the most common in English-speaking countries, especially the United States. And the first alleged alien abduction claim to be widely publicized was the Betty and Barney Hill abduction in 1961. I was a year old. UFO abduction claims have declined since their initial surge in the mid-1970s, and alien abduction narratives have found less popularity in mainstream media. Skeptic Michael Shermer, who Sarah Yusuf just mentioned, proposed that the ubiquity of camera phones increases the burden of evidence for such claims and may be a cause for their decline, because there is no longer any way to prove your story. Well, it used to be your story was its proof. And now because we have phones and cell phones with cameras and all kinds of closed circuit TV cameras and all of that, Michael Shermer insists that is why the actual accounts have declined, because nobody can prove their case. So mainstream scientists reject claims that the phenomenon literally occurs as reported. However, there's little doubt that many apparently stable people, stable mentally, who report alien abductions believe their experiences were real. John E. Mack, John Wilson, Rima Libo, David Gottlieb assessed that while psychopathology was associated with some cases, most reports were from sane, common people. And some abduction reports are quite detailed. An entire subculture has developed around the subject, with support groups and detailed mythos explaining the reasons for abductions. The various aliens, the Greys, the Reptilians, the Nordics, and so on. They're said to have these specific roles, origins, motivations. And abduction claimants do not always attempt to explain the phenomenon. That's because they can't. They don't understand it. But some take independent research interest in it themselves and explain the lack of greater awareness of alien abduction as the result of either extraterrestrial or governmental interest in cover-up, as Uncle Dave Potter said in the chat room a bit earlier. And there's a history to all this. There's paleo abductions. Thinking, I'm not talking about the diet. Keeping taking sips, keeping my throat clear tonight and unscratchy. But paleo abduction took place in ancient history. While the term alien abduction didn't achieve widespread attention until the 1960s, modern speculations about some of the older stories interpreted them as possible cases. UFO researcher Jerome Clark dubbed them paleo abductions, and some that he lists more recent history than you might think. But on November 27th of 1896, the edition of the Stockholm, California Daily Mail, Colonel H.G. Shaw claimed he and a friend were harassed by 3 tall, slender humanoids whose bodies were covered with a fine, downy hair, who tried to kidnap the pair. In the October 1953 issue of Man to Man magazine, an article by Leroy Thorpe entitled, "Are the Flying Saucers Kidnapping Humans?" asks the question, are an unlucky few of us, and perhaps not so few at that, being captured with the same ease as we would net butterflies, perhaps for zoological specimens, perhaps for vivisection or some other horrible death designed to reveal our interplanetary invaders what makes us tick? Rogerson wrote in 1955 publication of Harold T. Wilkins' Flying Saucers Uncensored, declared that Carl Hunrath and Wilbur Wilkinson, who'd claimed that they were contacted by aliens, had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Wilkins reported speculation that the duo were victims of alleged abduction by flying saucers. So that's some of the paleo stories that you'll hear. There's 2 landmark cases. An early alien abduction occurred in the mid-1950s with the Brazilian Antonio Villa Boas, which he did not receive a lot of attention until several years later. Widespread publicity was generated by the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case of 1961, culminating in the made-for-television film broadcast in 1975. I saw this film a long time ago, starring James Earl Jones as Barney Hill and Estelle Parsons as Betty Hill, dramatizing the events. And the Hill incident was probably the prototypical abduction case, and it was perhaps the first in which the claimant described beings that later became widely known as the Greys, and in which the beings were said to explicitly identify an extraterrestrial origin. Betty Hill also drew star maps, which could only be understood from an angle that was from opposite from those stars, from where we live on this planet. Things like that. Though these 2 cases now are sometimes viewed as the true earliest abduction cases, skeptic Peter Rogerson notes that they were only the first canonical abduction cases, establishing a template that later abductees and researchers would refine but rarely deviate from. And additionally, Rogerson notes purported abductions were cited contemporaneously, at least as early as 1954, and that the growth of the abduction stories is a far more tangled affair than the entirely unpredisposed official history would have us believe. And so the phrase entirely predisposed appeared in folklorist Thomas E. Bullard's story of alien abduction And he argued that alien abductions, as reported in the 1970s and 80s, had little precedent in folklore or fiction. And of course, the alien abduction experience and the stories given, they had later developments. Leo Sprinkle, a University of Wyoming psychologist, became interested in the abduction phenomenon in the 1960s. And Sprinkle became convinced of the phenomenon's actuality and was perhaps the first to suggest a link between abductions and cattle mutilation. And eventually, Sprinkle came to believe that he had been abducted by aliens in his youth, and he was forced from his job because of that in 1989. Bud Hopkins, the late Bud Hopkins, you've heard a lot about over the years, became very well known with the Whitley Strieber case. But Bud Hopkins had been interested in UFOs for some years. And in the 1970s, he became interested in abduction reports, and he began using hypnosis to extract more details of dimly remembered events. And Hopkins soon became a figurehead of the growing abductee subculture. In the 1980s, brought a major degree of mainstream attention to the subject. Works by Hopkins, novelist Whitley Strieber, historian David Jacobs, and psychiatrist John E. Mack represented alien abduction as a plausible experience. Also of note in the 1980s was the publication of folklorist Thomas Bullard's comparative analysis of nearly 300 alleged abductees. It's interesting reading. So I have not read it in its entirety. So with Hopkins, Jacobs, and Mack, accounts of alien abduction became a prominent aspect of ufology that grew all throughout the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. And there had been either abduction reports, the Hills being the best known, but they were believed to be few and far between and saw rather little attention from ufology, and even less attention from mainstream professionals or academics. So Jacobs and Hopkins argued that the alien abduction thing was far more common than earlier expected, and they estimated that tens of thousands or more North Americans had been taken by unexplained beings. And then also you got Jacobs and Hopkins argued that there was an elaborate process underway in which aliens were attempting to create human hybrids, the most advanced stage of which in the human hybridization program are known as hybrids. Though the motives for this effort were unknown. Why would they do this? Invasion, taking over. So there had been anecdotal reports of phantom pregnancy related to UFO encounters, at least as early as the 1960s. But Bud Hopkins, and especially David Jacobs, were instrumental in popularizing the idea of widespread systemic interbreeding efforts on the part of alien intruders. What do you think about that? Aliens breeding with humans. Why would they do this? This could be a good point to add that there was, Nick Redfern wrote about this a few years back. There was and still is a department within the Pentagon in the United States that he had the name for it, and I don't remember it off the top of my head. But they were there since the late 1940s to study the existence of UFOs and aliens. And of course, alien abduction. Collins comes to mind, the Collins Elite, they're called, the Collins Elite. And that this group, housed within the Pentagon, put forward the idea that aliens were the same thing as what we would consider in our past to be demons. And if you look into demonic theology in the Christian church, you would find that demons had once set about constantly trying to become human, but that God himself prevented them from taking full form as humans. And they were ones that were engaged in cross breeding efforts to try to create a species. Demonic beings, we think of them always as the anti-angels. Forget that they're beings as well if you look into theology, that they were trying to impregnate humans with their own seed in order to create perfect demonic offspring that were also human. And their efforts, though, were always halted at a certain point. Some of these beings, you could see they couldn't have eyes because there was always something human they could not have to complete the process. So they wouldn't have eyes, they would be missing limbs, they would things like that of that nature. Those very almost storybook, scary storybook type of alien stories we hear, or demonic stories. The demons appeared and they had no eyes in their sockets. That was because they were engaged in this interbreeding. So says some of the Collins elite and some of these other groups. And I see a lot of other people out here. Sean Best, demons helped Solomon build the second temple. Just saying, he said. You know, you might be onto something there, Sean. And Amanda Boyeri, same person. I don't think she's hiding that. She's just using a different account. Rubber thongs, flip-flops. I'm not sure where that came from. Let's see. She says satellite or plane always then gets angry. I make them look up and deem a weirdo and not freak them out. So there you go. Johann Dancing Gypsy. That's great to hear, Amanda. Glad you all had a good time. I missed something of that story, I'm sure, going back a little bit. But what do we got for time? We got about 8 minutes left before we leave the airwaves over on the radio station. So let's continue on with some of this material I have here. And according to the Boston Globe, writer Linda Rodriguez McRobbie. There's a clash of cultures in her name. Rodriguez McRobbie. Abduction and contact stories aren't quite the fodder for daytime TV talk show or daytime talk show. And New York Times bestsellers, they were decades ago. Today, credulous stories of alien visitation rarely crack the mainstream media. However much they thrive on niche TV channels and internet forums. And skeptic Michael Shermer noted that the camera phone age is increasing the burden of evidence on experiencers. But of course, we also see now a lot of UFO, UAP, and alien experience being talked about on mainstream 24/7 news channels. And it's very interesting stuff to watch it all being brought out and the government finally admitting to the UAP stories. They renamed it from UFO. Professor Bauer says, over in the chat room, according to all belief systems, we are the intentional result of others, not from Earth. Ergo, we are either hybrids or created physical or metaphysical. Yeah, I've heard that and pretty much adhere to that kind of thinking. Got to look at John Mack a little closer. If Jacob's credentials were impressive, then those of Harvard psychiatrist John Mack might seem impeccable in comparison. Mack was a very well-known, highly esteemed psychiatrist. He was the author of over 150 scientific articles and winner of the Pulitzer Prize for his biography of T.E. Lawrence. And if you don't know who T.E. Lawrence was, think Lawrence of Arabia. So he won a Pulitzer Prize for his biography of T.E. Lawrence. Mack became interested in the phenomenon in the late 1980s, interviewing over 800 people and eventually writing 2 books on the topic. And Mack devoted a substantial amount of time to investigating such cases and eventually concluded that the only phenomenon in psychiatry that adequately explained the patient's symptoms in several of the most compelling cases was post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And as noted at the time, this would imply that the patient genuinely believed that the remembered frightening incident had actually occurred. And the position of Mack came to endorse that. In June of 1992, Mack and the physicist David E. Pritchard organized a 5-day conference at MIT to discuss and debate the abduction phenomenon. The conference attracted a wide range of professionals representing a variety of perspectives. Writer C.D.B. Bryan attended the conference, initially intending to gather information for a short humorous article for the New Yorker on these alien abductee types. And while attending the conference, however, Bryan's view of the subject changed dramatically, and he wrote a serious, open-minded book on the phenomenon, and additionally interviewing many abductees, skeptics, and proponents. And Mack's study of numerous cases led him to the conclusion that while investigations and investigators should remain open to the possibility of experiences occurring, stories should not be considered to involve actual physical entities and should be treated like subjective witness reports of personal experience. And so the purported beings would remain outside of physical reality, and reports may be influenced by factors like expectations, memory reliability, and interviewer suggestion. He also reports that similarities to other experiences like OOBE. Now, you know what out-of-body experiences are. So the OBE, shortened to OBE. According to Lance Rivers, he's convinced in the reality of the phenomena, but attributes it to the interaction with the spiritual plane. So while Mack acknowledges that all of this leads to problematic speculation on the nature of beings and their motivations, he concludes that materialist science is inadequate to inquire into all of those areas. So once again, science and spirituality don't mix very well. They're not good bedfellows. Then you got to look at the abductees, of course. We've got about 5 minutes left here. The precise number of alleged abductees is uncertain. And one of the earliest studies of abductees found 1,700 claimants, while contested surveys argued that 5 to 6% of the general population might have been abducted. So demographics play into this, mental health, political conspiracy theories. Although abduction and other UFO-related reports are usually made by adults, some young children report similar experiences. I believe it was Peter Robbins' own sister had these experiences, if not Peter himself. These child reports often feature very specific details in common with reports of abduction made by adults, including the circumstances, the narratives, the entities, the aftermath of the alleged occurrences. And often these young abductees have family members who have reported having abduction experiences as well. Family involvement in the military or a residence near a military base is also very common among children abduction claimants. Mental health plays a big role in all of this. As a category, some studies show that the abductees have psychological characteristics that render their testimony suspect, while others show that as a group, abduction experience are not ENTS. It's hard to say experience and experience are not different from the general population in terms of psychopathology prevalence. So Elizabeth Slater conducted a blind study of 9 abduction claimants and found them to be prone to mildly paranoid thinking. Now, I would ask, do you think maybe that's because of their abduction experiences? They become this way, a little PTSD. In terms of psychopathology prevalence. And they had mildly paranoid thinking, nightmares, having a weak sexual identity. While Richard McNally of Harvard Medical School concluded in a similar study of 10 abductees that none of them was suffering from any sort of psychiatric illness. So it goes round and round. Depending on who you are, what study you conduct, you find all of this. And then, of course, there's the political conspiracy theories, which Uncle Dave mentioned earlier. You can also think of it as UFO conspiracy theory, ancient astronaut theory, UFO religion, etc. But political scientist Michael Barkin, without taking a position on if UFOs and aliens are real, highlighted links between radical politics and conspiracy theories involving UFOs, alien visitation, environmental pollution, hidden groups, government, and world takeover. And he observed the rise of a form of eclectic and easy for me to say, apocalyptic millennialism, millenarism, which he termed improvisional millenarism. Some of these words just don't roll off your tongue very well. And so UFO and abduction stories can often be part of a stigmatized or suppressed knowledge narrative, where alleged orthodoxy is claimed to be maintained in error for nefarious purposes and to keep society in ignorance. UFO and alien-related conspiracy theories emerged in far-right politics from the 1980s and onwards. See, now, I didn't realize that. Far-right politics? I don't know how far-right they're going there, but I haven't really seen rightist or conservative politics is really engaging in, unless you're talking about conspiracy theory in general, but alien-related conspiracy theories, I think they're trying to tie like, we're ruled by reptilians to the far rightists. I think that's kind of dumb, in my opinion. So in popular cultures, TV shows like The X-Files, motion picture not only included aliens as part of cover-up conspiracies with militia and black helicopters, but featured demonization of FEMA, a common target of conspiracy theorists and millenarian scenarios. I keep wanting to say millenarian. And I'm looking at our time, and we're out of it over on the radio station. So guys over on radio, I just want to say to you, thank you for being here. You can join us for more conversation over on our YouTube channel, Scotty Roberts. And so to all of you, good night, live long and prosper.
Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid radio program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
Well, hey there, welcome back to the captain's cabin. Arr. And I appreciate all of you being here, all of you staying after school, as it were, to join up. What'd you think of all that stuff on alien abduction and all of that? There's so much more material to go through. There's many accounts to go through, many stories to go through, and there's a lot of stuff out there on this topic. And like so many other topics we do, we could spend weeks talking about this stuff and not scrape the surface. We could spend time talking to actual abductees without scraping the surface. I know several. And so maybe we'll get some people on. I've also got a special guest coming up. I was waiting a bit till after the holidays. Going to be talking about some things as well that are very interesting. I don't want to put too much steam on it until we actually make that happen. That's coming up too. And let's see, what do we got going on over there in the chat room? We've got the Elion L was a collective of alien species, says Sean Vest, who all mixed their DNA with Denisovian man to create us. Let us create man in our image. And that's an interesting theory. And I'm not casting doubt or aspersion on what you're saying, Sean. But my first question would be, how do we know that? How do we know that's what happened? That's the first thing we have to ask ourselves in any of these things is if there's a claim like that, we've got to have evidence to back it up. And so where do we get that evidence from? How do we know that there was a collective of alien species that mixed with Denisovian humans? We don't know for sure. So that's the big question we have to ask on these things. Although you might be right, I don't know how you're right. Show us a little bit of theory on that and a little bit of evidence, because I'd love to see some more on that. Chuck Thurston says we're ruled by idiots pretty much, and Matthew Sainsbury followed that up with, yeah, Wendy and Scotty. I don't know if those were supposed to be related, but they came out both at the same time. Here's Uncle Dave. Hey, Uncle Dave.
Hola.
Hola. Ole, as they say.
I was out chatting with Flynn about swords.
Oh, good. Cool.
I'm going to send him some digital catalogs for stuff I carry so that...
Very cool.
Because we can get it at the dealer price and save money.
That. Yeah, he's very interested in investing some of his Christmas monies into buying a sword to hang on his wall. And I don't think he's looking for one that he can actually go out and fight with.
Yeah, I know. We had that long discussion.
Yeah.
He really wants something from the Lord of the Rings series in there.
Yeah. And
they're wall hangers. They're pretty to hang on the wall, yep, but they're pieces of crap.
They are. Sam had his Sting, which looked very nice, but you'd have lasted about 30 seconds in an actual fight with it.
Yeah.
I've got that sword of Aragorn hanging on my wall. That's fallen apart bit by bit. It was cheap. I think I got it for $13 or something, you know.
Yeah. 10, but he's interested also in a rapier that he can wear out at festivals. So
yeah. And so
and I can turn him on to some decent rapiers.
Yeah, something he can pick up for his pocket money. That's burning a hole in his pocket right now.
Oh, I hear it. I hear it. Him and Rowan both.
Oh, yeah.
I must spend all this cash I have.
Cash, I have to spend it. No, it's down for a while.
Uncle Dave, I have to spend this money now.
Exactly. That's what she does. That's what all my kids do. They get a little money, they want to spend it, but of course we're all like that to a certain extent.
Yeah. If I won the lottery, I'd only be rich for a few days. I'd
right.
own a lot of crap afterwards, but
I just won $3 million.
So, Scotty, do you want to go stay at my place in the Highlands, or do you want to go stay at my place in the Bahamas, or do you want to go stay at my place?
Oh, that went away quick.
I've just enough for airfare.
That's right. So, looking at some of the things that people are saying over in the chat room, Far too much attention, says Chuck Thurston, is being given to the far right and far left. Neither is going to get anything done for us. I agree with you. Although I would tend toward not the far right. I'm a more conservative follower, practitioner, and I think they have better answers than the left. But there you go. Rapid Dog says, "Our Father who art in heaven." Not sure what that was in relation to. Something said.
Well, if we were created by an alien species, that would make sense.
Sure, it would. So is that where we were created? Were we created by species not of this planet?
I think there's a lot of genetic evidence to say, because clearly there's a rewrite that happens in our genome that is not an artificial or no, it is an artificial. It's not a natural course of evolution. That the geneticists have said this is something that was physically manipulated.
Yes.
So,
but
it doesn't necessarily mean aliens. You could certainly look at that and say, human race has been on this planet for a lot longer than we give it credit for.
Oh yeah.
Civilizations have risen and fallen and risen and fallen. There have been numerous extinction level disasters that have sent us underground or whatever, and we've recovered from it. And who knows, in some ancient time, we have maybe genetically modified ourselves to be able to breathe the oxygen we have now or whatever.
Yeah.
So
who knows? Amanda
the
says,
ancient aliens might have been us.
So Sarah Yusuf keeps saying Nephilim. Nephilim.
Nephilim. You should know that word. There's this guy that wrote a book on it. Pretty good book.
Yeah, I've
been listening to it on the audio file.
Oh, how's it sound on audio?
It doesn't sound anything like you. I don't know why you didn't read that yourself.
I could have. Oh, well, my publisher wanted somebody else to read it.
So he's clearly never heard you read your own stuff.
He hasn't. And I think at the time, they also didn't realize I could design book covers. Because they showed me their cover design for The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim very early on in the process. I wasn't even done writing the book. And I looked at it and I went, ooh, I could do better than that. They showed dark clouds and a silhouetted winged creature falling upside down toward the earth.
Oh my God. And, did they have an AI design that for you?
Absolutely not. And so I designed a cover. The current cover, as a matter of fact, and that current cover, my publisher said very politely, he says, "Why don't you work on writing the book, and we'll work on designing the cover?" And I'm like, "Okay." I said, "But I want you to take a look." And he got back to me not long after that, and he said, "Well, maybe we can make an exception here." He says, "I really like your cover." And then I ended up designing my own cover for the follow-up on the Reptilians. I designed the cover for the Exodus Reality, and I've designed all my covers. So
I do know a thing or two about cover design.
Yes. So I told him, I said, I've done this for a long time. So, well, how does the book sound when it's read to you?
It sounds fine. It sounds fine. I haven't listened to it in the last couple of weeks because I've been deep diving on Norse mythology because I'm working on these paintings, and so I've got Neil Gaiman in my ear all the time reading me Norse mythology.
Nice. I like that.
Neil's reading it himself, and that's part of what made me think to say that, because it's like I really like hearing Neil read his stuff. Yeah. And I like hearing you read your stuff.
It's nice when you hear the writer reading their own stuff.
Yeah. Well, and knowing the writers, it makes it that much more personal. It's like they're sitting there reading to me while I'm working.
It's like Stephen Fry. I was listening to his book on mythology. really
I downloaded
enjoy
that
it.
too so the day we were over there painting and you were playing
Yeah.
that for me, I went home and downloaded that book.
Mm,
And another one too. I think he's got another one out on mythology. I think I downloaded more than one.
cool.
But yeah,
Odin and Thor among them, Matthew Sainsbury.
exactly.
That's
Though
two
I'm very displeased with Valhalla right now.
Valhalla.
The painting I'm working on. It's
Oh, I thought you meant a book. Sorry. So I thought
no, it's not right. It's just sitting in the corner. I stare at it every day and just and it's like I'm gonna get a black roller and roll the damn thing out.
I got to the point where I had paintings staring at me from the corner that I just turned toward the wall.
Yeah, no, because I keep it towards me because I visually see the finished painting. I see the underpainting for what I've done, and I'm like, well, that's not what I have in my head. Why did I paint that?
Yeah, why does that look that way? That's not how I envisioned it. I've got a portrait of Rady that is sitting unfinished from probably
So
10
do I.
years ago. Don't like
Oh,
it.
mine's not that old.
So
I
I've
started
got two paintings in my office that are, I showed them on the show last week, but I've got one that's 40 years old now. The pilot, the fighter pilot.
Yeah.
And then I've got
my dad said to me, he goes, how many paintings do you have going? And I said, oh, well, Dad, with oils, every day you can start a new one because they got to sit for a week before I can paint on them again. So I want to paint. I got to just start a new canvas.
To me, that's why I don't paint in oils. It's just counterproductive. I would rather sit down and paint a picture and get it done than have to wait weeks in between for a drying process.
I saw an interesting video on Bob Ross, and they said, did you ever think that Bob Ross was just painting the same scenes over and over again from different angles? And I thought to myself, yeah, I've kind of noticed that. They took a whole bunch of his paintings. He's got hundreds of paintings out there.
I'm sure.
And did stop motion, take a picture of the painting, move to the next one, take a picture of the painting, and put it together and made an animation that you're in this meadow and you follow this stream up towards the mountain, then you cut across and then it starts to snow, and then it's a winter scene, and then it's a bunch of winter scenes, and then the snow goes away and it's spring, and then it goes into summer and then back into autumn.
So what you're saying is Bob Ross was a genius.
Yeah, apparently.
Alien influences, Sarah Youssef. She says she's
I
also
think
a
Bob
big fan of
Ross is
Stephen
an
Fry.
alien influence.
Jahir McKenzie says, I have a couple of paintings just sitting. Yeah, it's the way it goes sometimes. I got things unfinished that I'd like to finish that I never get to. And
I'm that way with stories and scripts. I've got 5 or 6 scripts that are unfinished. I've got 3 novels that are in various states of completion.
Mm-hmm.
I've got the poetry book that's
Why do you
currently
think we
missing.
keep finding these old works of the masters that are all unfinished?
So yeah.
I think creative people tend to be creatively ADHD. We have an idea and we want to work on that idea and we're so into it. And then as we're getting into the idea, another idea sparks up. We go, oh, put this.
I heard someplace the Mona Lisa took like 30 or 40 years to paint. That he started it in I can't remember if he's in Florence or wherever, started the painting and then completely painted over and redid it and then set it aside, and then at various points in his life would pull it out and work on it and put it away.
Yep. Chuck Thurston wants to know what your unfinished painting looks like that doesn't look like Valhalla.
I won't show it on camera. It's awful.
Yeah.
It's awful.
I have pieces like that. I just don't show them.
Yeah.
Like, I ain't showing that to anybody.
There's no evidence that I ever took an art class looking at this thing.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at it and I'm going, what was I on when I did that? I don't understand it. Seriously,
I know.
I'm gonna take black gesso and just cover the canvas and start over, I think.
Yeah. There's that.
And yet in the center, the arch that is the doorway to Valhalla, it's perfect. I did the arch, and then I built out from there, and I'm just unhappy with everything else.
I
So
hear you. Needs wings, silver wings, says Chuck Thurston. Yeah, there are
yeah,
things that I sometimes, when I paint or draw or digital, I will get an idea and I say, now if I do that, I'm stepping into an area where if I do that, I'm going to have to either trash the painting if it doesn't work, do a lot of erasing, or digitally go back, 50 steps, which would be a heartache anyway. That's as bad as painting over something. And I've been there a couple of times,
well,
even recently. And it's
I've got
like,
these other pieces in the Viking series, and people have really liked them. And then this one, and I'm just like, did I run over it with the car? What did I do with it? How
yeah,
did that one end up like that?
Oh, that doesn't work. Yeah. So
Yeah.
So anyway, well, I'm going to tell you folks, I'm not going to go an hour here tonight. I'm pretty much drained already, and I'm going to cut it short here because I'm up here working in the Northwoods.
Really? Because I thought
Yeah,
Bauer would call in.
Yeah, that's the announcement for Bauer to call in. So I got to
Or
get out of
Sarah
here.
or somebody. I didn't realize I was going to be the only one on here, but
I fell
I
asleep
didn't get my fix
before.
yesterday, and I didn't get my fix earlier today. So I thought, I'll
Yep.
do something. And I just missed your thing last night. I
Yeah.
turned on the computer about the time you were logging off, and I'm like, well, damn it.
Yeah. So I fell asleep before the show. I set an alarm. At about 8:16, I laid down and I set an alarm for 8:45 because I said I will be worthless if I don't get a little take a little nap here, cat nap anyway.
What are you
So,
working on with Andy?
What's that?
What are you working on with Andy?
Finishing up his websites right now for his book and for his skateboard company. And you can go see those sites. They're pretty cool. If you go to
I'm sure he's got links on his Facebook page.
Babs.com. That's his book page. And that's his personal site and his book page. And then you can go to skateco.com. And that's his skateboard company up here. And I took a few more pictures while I was there today, and for the website, and creating swag for his book site and stuff like that. So, yeah, and get this book going, the new book going on anxiety. So we're already writing on that.
That makes me anxious.
Yeah, it makes me anxious. So that's what I'm doing up here with him. And hopefully Rainey and the kids will come up on Friday, and we'll stay here. They're going to put us into a bigger room if they come up. And so we got beds for everybody. And
is there a pool there?
There's a pool here.
Well, then the kids will come. Yep.
So they'll be
Rowan
hanging
can't pass up a pool.
So
that girl likes to swim.
Yes. So anyway, I'm going to get out of here so I can get to sleep, or I'm going to be worthless at 6 in the morning when we get rolling. So he's an early guy, and so am I. So I want to make sure I am not dragging.
Getting up at the crack of dawn, 4 a.m. Getting up at 4 a.m. Are you? Are you going to get up at 4 a.m. tomorrow?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So my body wakes me up every day.
I just going to bed.
Yep.
But I have started a whole new thing that has been working pretty good for me, and it's you that's rubbed off on me. That and Ken Ballos getting up in the morning to listen to Ken. So I get up and I paint in the morning now with the natural light, which
you got to turn off those vampire hours and switch.
And then I write at night. So I've been writing in the evening. So when the sun goes down, I put the paintbrushes away and I get the laptop out and I work on the books.
There it is.
I have a goal to finish the unfinished novels and the scripts this year.
Okay.
And create these paintings.
I'm going to let you go so you can work on those.
All right.
and I'm going to go work on looking at the insides of my eyelids.
Uh,
So, everybody, I want to thank you for being here.
There's
Uncle
nothing
Dave,
new there.
we'll see you later, brother.
Take it easy.
Talk to you soon. And everybody else, I want to thank you for being here. And thanks for joining us. And we'll see you again, not tomorrow night, but Friday night. I'll see you all again. So you all live long and prosper.
Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid radio program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.